Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for attending our forecast webinar today. We are going to give just another minute to see if we have some last minute people joining, and then we will get started. Thank you. All right, everyone, welcome to our forecast. We're going to get started. Today's forecast is all about macro trends, and we are really excited to share everything that we've researched. To get us kicked off, we'll give a brief overview all about what macro trends are. These are trends that usher in big themes that will stay with us for a longer trend cycle and eventually dictate the more specific micro trends to come. We are super psyched to share what we have in this feature, and we have found that what we found in our research is that we feel that we're sort of teetering on a point where future proofing and progress are on the minds of many, and we're seeing a little bit of experimenting to see what works and what consequences will unfold. This sort of general mood kind of accompanies a demographic shift as well, and we'll explore that a little bit on the following pages. Through this macro forecast, we are going to take a look at themes of perspective, wellness, branding, purpose, technology, and play. And so we're super excited to get this kicked off. Here is our demographic snapshot. We really wanted to capture where all of our demographics are in 2023. So this is kind of a nice overview of each generation. We've listed their current ages in 2023, kind of the range, and also the years of when each generation was born. So quick overview, boomers, they're the generation of Woodstock, free love, marching on Washington. Okay, boomer gave them a bad rap the last couple of years, but this generation is entering years where they have the time, the money, and the incentive to reflect on their past experiences to create a better world. Gen X currently ages 43 to 58. So in 2023, they're a bit divided between their roles. They're either parents, they could be grandparents, they're entering either maybe the prime of their careers or preparing for retirement, just based on where those ages fall. This generation is at the peak years of influence in all realms: career, social, political, and family life. Millennials, also, they're technically called Gen Y, but everybody calls them millennials. They are currently ages 27 to 42. So we are actually seeing millennials start to leave the 20s behind in just a few years here. They're the only generation who grew up with technology, but they also remember the times before computers and smartphones. Part of this generation was raised by boomers and part by Gen X. These splits bring a valuable perspective to this generation. Gen Z, currently ages 11 through 26, they grew up watching both their peers and the millennial generation above them in real time on YouTube, on social media. And this early exposure to all of that life offers has instilled a confidence in this generation about what they really want. Just worth noting here too, the oldest are starting to have kids. Alphas, these are ages we have on here, -5 to age 10. So this whole generation hasn't been born yet, but they're being raised primarily by younger Gen X and millennials. And we're thinking that though this generation is still quite young, so we can't say too much with too much certainty, but we're thinking that this generation's parents will strive to give them the things that they had or compensate for the things that they lost. And this may play out as being raised with a focus on limited screen time, a focus on more outdoor time, outdoor play, and maybe an early focus on things like nutrition and not being as overscheduled as we've seen some of the previous generations. We have a little bit more information and a deeper dive onto demographics in our digital copy of this presentation. So go ahead and click on that, click through, and we do a deep dive into each of these demographics. We wanted to dive into this concept of multi-generational living. This is something we've been thinking a lot about based on especially the rising cost of housing, childcare, elder care, and the cost of living in general, leading extended families to perhaps band together under one roof. We're thinking that something that may accelerate this trend is this flexibility of remote work. This allows families to relocate to live in the same city. And in multifamily living specifically, we may see multi-generational families living together in either the same communities or even maybe within the same unit. This allows a little bit of that sharing of the responsibility financially, childcare, chores, household living. And so we're curious if sort of family or multi-generational units or perhaps townhomes will become a little bit more popular going forward. This is something that we're tracking. Another macro trend that we are excited to follow is this concept of space tourism. I actually shouldn't really say concept because this is something that's happening and becoming more, we're seeing more and more companies offering this. It's slowly becoming more affordable in a way. This is still super expensive, so we are only seeing kind of those who have access to this kind of tourism exploring this. But the idea behind space tourism is that they're sending people up and they're able to see this view of space of our planet from truly this new perspective. You can see this image I love of this man who has landed after seeing space and being in space. You can see the emotion on his face and just in his body language. So we're really curious if as this picks up, as this increases, as more people are talking about this, if we will see a little bit more of an emotional reaction to protecting the planet, perhaps a different take on the environmental movement. When we look back to the 70s, you can see this image here, the blue marble, the first photograph of the Earth as a whole, which was published in 1972. And a lot of people kind of reference this image and this perspective shift in the 70s as something that sort of inspired the environmental movement then. And so we're curious if the idea of space tourism will perhaps offer us another perspective shift too. We say here too that we will be inspired to explore outside our bodies, perhaps via spiritual avenues like meditation, psychedelics. We have a note here, many which are starting to be prescribed legally, AI, which we'll talk about later in this presentation, and virtual reality. So thinking that we're becoming a little bit more untethered from our planet and what kind of things will follow. This is the question that we're inspired to ask. This page follows nicely, but this is the idea of looking at celestial bodies. We're taking sort of a wellness approach to when we are exploring this concept, but people are seeking to find true well-being, and in many cases, they're looking to nature to model their behavior, connect deeply with a higher source. People are looking to the sky. They're syncing their bodies, their minds with with the moon, the sun, the stars, and we have a few examples here. People are using these kind of astrology apps to track the lunar cycles. We have this beautiful example here of this tide clock, which is a beautiful way to track if you're living on a coast to track the tides and you're just having that mental prompt each day. We're seeing a rise in these glamping tents or cabins that feature these stargazing windows. People are looking to be a little bit more connected to the outer space and the world above us. 1,000 hours outside may be a concept that some of you on the call are familiar with, but they're actually a for-profit social good company founded by a family, it's a family business, and their thinking here is that they wanted to be able to match for raising their kids to match nature time with screen time. They're looking at a statistic that says that kids consume media through screens for 1,200 hours a year, and so they're trying to match this with time in nature. As families are trying to pursue and meet this goal, people are posting about it on social media. They're using hashtags. They're really tracking their time. And though this was specifically intended originally for kids and for raising families and kids with less screen time, many adults are also jumping on the bandwagon and like really trying to get their 1,000 hours in as well. So it's cool to see where this trend will go and tracking the importance that people are really feeling with spending time outdoors. We've talked quite a bit about the concept of social wellness. Last year, we did a whole forecast release on wellness that focused heavily on this, but we really believe this macro trend is one that holds, and we wanted to bring it forward here as well. And what we talk about here is these concepts of saunas, of cold plunges, not just being something that is used by a single user in a very private, secluded room, but something that can be offered similar to the way that people sort of use hot tubs. You're in your swimsuit, it's co-ed, it's casual, it's social, you're in, you're out. And we think that this is an approach to wellness that we'll see carry forward. We wanted to speak a bit about this concept of brand story. We're really exploring branding in a deeper way and really taking note of brands that come alive off of the 2D realm of the screen and sort of make their way into the 3D reality of our lives. We specifically highlighted on this page the website Woo. This is a really good example of a digital platform that seeks to kind of come alive off of the screen and interact with readers in different ways. We sort of play off of this on this next page, which we've titled Brand Ritual. And we're exploring the concept here of brands that create an aspect of ceremony or ritual to their product experience, and that allows them to become a more intimate part of the user's lifestyle. We have a couple examples on this page that we'll talk through. The first one is Future Mood. They create mood-enhancing aura sunglasses. You can see pictured here, these sunglasses don't just come on a little card. They're beautifully packaged. They're in a pouch. They're in a box. They come with a branded lens cleaning cloth, this whole card, another card, matches. And when you open it, it arrives with what they call their first dose guide, and it instructs the user to play the Spotify playlist that accompanies the sunglasses, light the incense, match, face east, center your mind. There's all these instructions for how to properly engage with the product to create, like we say here, more of a ceremony or ritual around its use. Another example that many are probably familiar with is Spotify Wrapped. At the end of every year, Spotify releases a graphically pleasing and shareable recap of all their top listening stats. And this is something that is so interactive and engaging. It seems like for all of December, people are like, what's your wrapped? What's your wrapped? Everyone's talking about it. And it's something that people look forward to. And we would maybe venture to say, think about throughout the year when they're engaging with Spotify and sort of noticing what they're listening to a lot. And they're probably like, oh, this is going to show up on my wrapped in December. The last example here is a brand called the Honey Pot. It's a company that specializes in feminine care products, and they position many of their products in these kits as rituals. You can see here it says menstrual ritual. So you get 4 products, and we're really fascinated by how they're turning an essential hygiene and care purchase into something that's more than that. It becomes sort of a ceremony. Curated convenience is our next page here, and we're really loving exploring this concept. We're saying here, though online shopping is here to stay, it's been really fascinating to watch the return to brick and mortar, especially as these digitally native brands find their place in physical retail. Shoppers are exhausted by this endless choice that online shopping has to offer. So these brick and mortar curated bodegas or department stores really limit choice, but offer such cool curated product that it feels really thoughtful, and you can select something maybe even more easily than if you were exploring and had the full World Wide Web to explore and find a purchase. Sometimes that's overwhelming. And there's something to be said for the idea of curated choice. This next concept is the idea of regenerative capitalism. This is a concept of looking at the processes by which the universe maintains healthy and sustainable ecological systems, and then applying those strategies to economic systems. So to put it as simply as we can, regenerative capitalism refers to business practices that restore and build rather than exploit and destroy. This concept is kind of a step beyond net zero, and it's about leaving a net positive impact. And this can be in an environmental or sustainable way, which is maybe the first place our minds go, but this can also be things like doing social good It doesn't have to be just about environmentalism. So this is a really interesting concept, all about this concept of biomimicry, emulating nature as closely as possible in all our human-created systems. So this concept is emerging. We're starting to hear a little bit more about it, and we're tracking it here as a macro trend. Along those same lines, we wanted to explore this page all about win-win brands. And we have a few examples here to explain that concept a little bit further. The first is Alter Eco Chocolate, and they are growing the chocolate. So they're growing the cacao in a way that has actually a positive impact on the planet. They're doing this through regenerative agriculture, which grows food that actually replenishes the soil as the crops are grown. They're growing it alongside native crops. So they're really sort of reestablishing native land while also growing the product that they need to create the chocolate. Another example here is we had a design student who created a paint called Cellor made from demolished concrete, and it was able to actually absorb 20% of its weight in carbon. This is a concept project for that a student had created, so not something that is on the market quite yet, but just to see this idea that something that can be used every day, like paint, can actually absorb carbon dioxide as it also serves as paint to coat our walls or whatever we're using it for. Last example is What If Foods. And these are also made from regenerative crops, similar to the chocolate, but these are more unheard of crops that people may not be familiar with. One example is this thing called the bam nut, and it's a crop that grows really well in poor soil that doesn't have a lot of nutrients, doesn't need a lot of water, and you can actually create what a food product which they've created, which is noodles. And it's really cool to see that they have actually branded their packaging with this way to explore and share with the purchasers that this is all part of their story. Taking a little bit of a shift here to another macro trend, this one is called proximity coworkers. We're really interested in tracking this. This is kind of an emerging trend that we're following, but we're seeing that as more people than ever are working from home or working in some sort of co-working setting, information sharing is happening organically across industries. You may be working at home with someone in your family who works in a completely different industry, and as you're passing each other or you're working near each other, you're talking about what you're working on, and that may spark ideas and perhaps even cross collaboration across industries. This is something that we are tracking, and we're excited to sort of see what innovation comes out of this simply close proximity of people working on two different projects or two different industries in the same space. AI generated art. So we are all familiar with AI at this point. ChatGPT has taken over, but not everyone knows that OpenAI, who has created ChatGPT, also has another program called DALL-E 2. And this is an image generator, AI run, able to create realistic images and art from a text description. So this example here, a Van Gogh style painting of an American football player, and this is what the AI has generated. It's really interesting to see how this will evolve. Of course, we're tracking closely ChatGPT, everything OpenAI is doing, but here we really wanted to showcase what is happening in the visual space as well. Along these lines, we're looking again at the metaverse, and we wanted to look at it through an architectural lens. So we have a few examples here. One is the Viceverse, which Bjark Ingels group created actually a virtual office for Vice Media Group called Viceverse. And this is located on the Decentraland platform, and its purpose is actually to act as this virtual innovation hub that allows the employees who are creating metaverse projects and digital products to collaborate within this digital space. Another example over here is Levin is a lifestyle hotel. They actually have a physical hotel in the UK, but their second hotel exists fully virtually again in the Decentraland platform. And interestingly, the founder describes this as an investment in the brand versus a revenue generating venture. We're really looking closely at how people are assigning value to these metaverse architectural spaces, and this is an interesting perspective. He goes on to describe it as a virtual amenity space for their guests. We can't talk about all these digital spaces without talking about digital humans, and our favorite one of the most famous is Lil Miquela. She has been around on social media for a while, and so we're sort of tracking her social media presence. She's been on Instagram since 2016, and we know Instagram has evolved quite a bit since 2016. As we know, the shift in social media is going so much toward video content. So we've actually seen Lil Miquela on Instagram as more of a photo interaction level kind of shift into that video realm. So she's slowly becoming even more and more lifelike. And it'll be interesting to see how we interact with these digital humans who people are truly building some sort of relationship with, some sort of influencer style relationship with. It will be interesting to see how they sort of lead us further into AI, into the metaverse. That's something we're tracking. We are seeing some practical uses for these digital humans. In the banking sector, digital humans provide banking services and portfolio management for SPD Bank. And so we're curious to see how this will continue to grow and evolve. Taking a little shift away from all this AI and going back in time, getting a little bit of relief from all of this digital world and shifting to sort of nostalgia. We have the statement here that nostalgia is always in, but this time around it has a definite sense of play. We're looking at maybe this is influenced by millennial parents wanting to give their kids the toys they played with as kids, which we always see every generation, or another perspective, millennials bucking the notion that toys are for kids and purchasing toys for themselves as kind of a collectible. Gen Z is along for the ride too. They're especially drawn to Y2K nostalgia. And this is something that is made even more powerful with all of the access to streaming services. One example is Gen Z streaming all of their favorite 90s and OZs shows like Friends and The Office. And so they're very well versed in what life was like at that time. We couldn't not include the American Girl's new historical figures that are from the 90s, complete with dial-up desktop PCs and phones. Um, but we really wanted to showcase this as a macro trend because we think that this sort of sense of nostalgia will become a little bit more important and people will be looking for a little bit more of that relief as we start to see so much of a shift into this digital world, as we see so much AI. And so this is a little bit of a respite from that. And then we wanted to take one look at what's happening in the hospitality world. And one example is the unique stays on Airbnb. This is something that's sort of been gaining traction for a while, and we think that it will live on as a bit of a macro trend. But for those who aren't familiar, Airbnb has what they call their OMG category, and guests can actually browse for these highly unique stays. So you can see examples here. This is actually a potato, a home that looks like a potato that you can stay in. There's really beautiful silos. They're not all as kitschy as the potato. This is a cave, which is a little bit extreme, but so many, I think they even have a whole section that is just tree houses. And so people are really looking for this unique experience, tying into that experiential nature of simply staying at a hotel or staying away from home. We couldn't not mention the photo and video taking opportunities at these spaces. They're super shareable, but really travelers are seeking this novel experience where they can embrace the spirit of play and kind of lose themselves in this imaginative world. And again, there may be a parallel here to this sort of playful, experiential kind of fantasy land, imagination land versus what you can get in the digital world or in the metaverse, having these similar experiences, but digital only. So it'll be interesting to see how this kind of concept of play and imagination starts to play out even more in the real world, either inspired by the digital world or as a reaction to it. And that is one reason why we wanted to feature this here as a macro trend. That does conclude our webinar for today. I want to thank everyone so much for attending, for taking the time. It's a lot of information in just 25 minutes. So please feel free to click back through our digital version. And of course, we will send the recording out after this call. So thank you all for attending. Everyone have a great rest of your week.